Welcome back. We can still say Happy New Year, I think, because it's our first show of the new year. Welcome back to Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. Ryan Drury back here. Clarkey's back, sporting a new bucket. Christmas
you like that?
present, maybe, Clarkey? Yeah, it's a sharp bucket.
It was a Christmas present from my daughter and her boyfriend, Dan, yeah. Or maybe it was just Dan. I can't remember. Maybe just Dan.
Maybe just Dan. Yeah. Good Caps fan, Mr. Dan. I like that.
A good Caps fan with a good cap. Get it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yours is fine too.
You have a good Christmas there, sir. Everything good?
Yeah, it was good, man.
What'd
Lots
you get?
of relaxing.
Anything exciting?
I mean, I don't know. Some records. That was that's always exciting. I got a couple records.
Nice.
That's fun.
Any Lionel vinyl?
No Lionel. That's not really my vibe.
No kidding. I know that.
Vinyl. I like
I'm
Lionel.
well aware.
He's fine.
I'm well aware.
I like Lionel. I don't know that I love him enough to like have it on my record shelf. You've probably got the entire anthology like in alphabetical order signed and with
I do have one album signed. Yes. Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not more. I really am. Did you get?
Like I only met him
to
once.
His new show or what?
What new show?
I don't know. Like, isn't he going on tour again? I'm assuming for Christmas you got like a ticket package or something.
No,
I don't know.
I didn't get any tickets. He's. I think he's in Europe. But anyway, we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, listen. I'm glad that the holidays were productive for you. Obviously, you got the new cap, so that's an improvement right there. No Lionel vinyl for me. No. I'll tell you one thing though, buddy. Yep. One thing that definitely wasn't productive over the holidays, and it's something that we're not very used to, was Team Canada at the World Juniors, man.
I know.
For the first time ever, knocked out in the quarterfinal round in back-to-back years. Pretty crazy stuff. I don't know how much of the tournament you caught. I'm sure you saw some of it.
Yeah, no, quite a bit.
Yeah, man. I don't know.
They couldn't score, man. They couldn't score. I wasn't up on. I heard a lot of chatter online about they didn't take the best players. They left a lot of good goal scorers at home. Blah blah blah. But they couldn't score. And you know what? Like I get the goalie played well, but they needed some big saves at big times, and I didn't think they got that either.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought Carter George was their best player. Like,
yeah, but that doesn't say a lot.
I know
it really doesn't say a lot. It doesn't. I get it.
I think he was really good. I think he was really good at the tournament. To be perfectly fair, I really do. Like he's a huge difference maker, and I thought he was really good.
If he was a huge difference maker, they would have won.
You have to score though. That's the thing, right? And like and the penalties, like there's a lot. Like he's the last guy I watched every second of the tournament. Mm-hmm. He's the last worry on my list. Like he's at the very bottom of my concerns of what went on. Yeah. And ultimately, like I said it in our intermission at our first Storm game back, following the tournament. Like I don't necessarily actually blame a lot of the players. Like, yes. And some people I understand are like confused by that and completely disagree because yes, the players go out there and they play. And did some guys have underwhelming tournaments where I thought and expected a lot more out of them? Yes. Did they leave a lot of guys at home that I personally would have had on the team, in the very least invited to the camp? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, they only took 6 of the top 18 scorers that they could have taken.
That's insane. That's insane.
And the argument there, let's start there with like the selection process. And I'm not going to name any players that were on this team. I just don't think that's fair. Like, that's my stance on it. These are still kids. I get it. And criticism of guys is fair. It's just, I feel like sometimes with this tournament and these kids, it goes a little too far. It really does. Yeah. So, but I don't even want to bring up guys that I would have brought. What I will say though is that Hockey Canada deserves every barb that they're getting.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And you know what else pissed me off is after the game and after they were eliminated, you saw on TSN and everywhere else, player after player being trotted out. Where was the management at that time? They were getting criticized a lot, the management, and they just hid and let the players talk. And I thought that was shallow. I thought it was gutless. We did hear from maybe their head scout or whatever a couple days ago.
They came out later.
Yeah, but they shouldn't have come out later. They should have come out right after the game. They should have been Dave Cameron on the mic answering questions like a human being instead of an egomaniac. And then the management should have been out there. Like, I thought it was terrible to just trot these kids out and not have any management who put this team together.
I really, and we've talked about this a lot, Clarkey, like, and it's not going anywhere because it eats up time and it's part of the perceived entertainment value, I guess, for some people. I actually, like, even in the pros, I don't really see what the point is a lot of times of mid-intermission and post-game interviews a lot of the time. Especially after losses. Like, I get some people disagree with that, but like,
no, I tend to agree with you too. But everyone wanted to hear
what do you want them to say?
Why, as you said, they left a lot of goal scorers at home. They should have been up there talking about that and explaining themselves.
And in this situation, I agree. Like, the management, the adults that were involved here.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
Like,
I agree. Hearing from a 16, 17-year-old kid.
Well, like they dragged Gavin McKenna out there.
I know.
Like the 17-year-old who,
had a great
is a guy.
Though. He's a great player.
Well, I think next year he'll be the best player at the tournament. Like, they trot him out there, and I'm like, what do you want this poor kid to say? Like,
exactly my point. That's exactly my point. Like, it's ridiculous. And then Dave Cameron, like, I don't know if we spoke before the tournament, but I've never really been a Dave Cameron fan. Like, I haven't.
Well,
I knew Dave pretty well when he coached him. Not pretty well, I shouldn't say that. I knew him when he coached in Mississauga because, of course, we billeted a couple players from the majors. And Dave was the coach. And I don't know. I didn't have a huge love on for him then. And he, that year... the Stuart Percy year, he lost in the final of the OHL, and then the OHL. How did it work? Because they lost in the final, but they still went to the Mem Cup. They must have hosted. Mississauga must have hosted the Mem Cup because they got there, and then they lost.
That or the team that beat them was the host. That or the team that beat them was the host. One of the two scenarios.
Yeah. Anyway, they lost both. He couldn't win a big game, and he
never really has.
No. And
I know
he has won the World Juniors, but
yes, I know.
But I don't know. I think they needed a different voice. They needed a different coach. What's wrong, Ryan? What's wrong with going and getting, like, if you're gonna get an old coach, what's wrong with going to get a Gerard Gallant or a Bruce Boudreau or someone like there's some pretty good coaches available, like some really good coaches that they could have went and got.
Well, and I understand, and here's the thing, like, I'll finish up with management. Like, they were getting criticized for this team at selection camp.
Yeah.
Because immediately there was noise about guys that weren't even invited to the camp that I was like, wow, really? And again, I'm not going to name players and disparage them. That's, I really don't blame them. And look, end of the day, as we transition from management where they had a very archaic view, you heard some of the management team come out after and say, oh, we wanted guys that weren't just one dimensional. But I'm like, guys, one dimensional in what facet? Like, you had guys.
Yeah.
The strength of Canadian teams internationally always has been that the best guys usually go. And they're good enough because we're Canadian hockey players that we're sending here to adjust and change their role. Jeff O'Neill, who was awesome. We're going to hear from him later in the show, by the way.
I'm excited.
An interview that I did, to be fair, far before the World Juniors started, but I managed to sit down with Jeff on my Guelph Storm podcast. We're going to air that interview here because I think it's really, really cool that I got to sit down with the O-Dog. But he was saying during the tournament, like, look, when he was a World Junior player, he was on the fourth line. He was the number one scorer on the Guelph Storm that year. He was on his way to being a 5th overall pick in the NHL. And he showed up at that tournament and they were like, you're the fourth line right winger. Here's what you're going to do. And that line contributed some goals and he played a hard checking role. He was not on the top line. He was not on the power play.
That's right. That's the way it works.
at the Olympics. Rick Nash, Jonathan Taves, like
that's the
Joe
way it
Thornton.
works, and these kids got to realize that at this age, that's the way it works. Do you think it has anything to do with the kids nowadays don't want to accept that role?
No,
I don't either. I don't either. Do you think this team? Let me before you answer that. Do you think the reason they didn't pick the best goal scorers or the best players for this tournament is because they thought the team they had was the best chance to beat the Americans?
Yes, and
which is absolute ridiculous.
Yeah, they said that they outright acknowledged we built this team to beat the Americans.
Yeah,
that's
you don't
not what
do
we
that.
do here in Canada.
No, you don't.
Look, guys, like we compete in a lot of sports, Winter Olympics. It's great in terms of big team sports. Yeah. This is the one thing, and I agree with what Brian Hayes said following the tournament with O-Dog. Like, this is our thing that we have where we're like, we are without question the best at this. By the way, we still are. I don't want to hear this nonsense about how the Americans have surpassed us. The Americans just won back-to-back gold medals for the first time ever. That's cute. I remember when. Yeah. That's really cute. Yeah. Good for them. They full marks for winning this tournament. They were fantastic out there. Like full marks. But let's not sit back here and go, oh my God, what a disaster. Yeah, I agree. On two fronts. One, if they had brought more players with game-breaking talent, that and again, I'm not picking on anybody on this team, and you'll hear why in my follow-up. If they had brought guys with the more game-breaking talent that are used to playing that role and executing it at a high level, they win this tournament. And the Matthew Schaefer injury threw a huge wrench in the tournament. Let's not disregard that. However, and I stand by this. I said it in our intermission in our first game back on the Guelph broadcasts. I still think that this team that they did put together could have won the gold medal if they were coached better. And let's move right on into that. And your buddy Dave Cameron, friend of mine. I've not been a fan of him for a long time either. I said it then. I'll say it again here. I do not know Dave personally. I bet he's maybe a good guy. I'm just going to tell you that in my limited resources around the game, which are growing, I have heard from numerous people that I will not name on this show for obvious reasons that Dave is not exactly a popular guy amongst players and other executives. Let me just say that. And
so how does he get the job then, Ryan? And how does he lose
this is what Hockey Canada does. This is what Hockey Canada does. They've got their guys and they bring them back all the time. They're very slow to adjust. And this
I thought we had a new regime. I thought Hockey Canada was revamped.
The board. I don't know that any of the people that were involved in terms of like actual team selection
the board
were gassed.
But let me ask you this. Did Dave Cameron, when he was the coach last year, get a 2-year deal?
No, there's no deal to be the Hockey Canada coach. They
then
name a new
why
guy
on earth would you bring a guy back? He wasn't the
coach last year. He wasn't the coach last year, to be fair. Sorry. Alan Letang of the Sarnia Sting was the coach.
I thought, yes.
Now,
correct.
Now, he did win a gold medal at this tournament, and these aren't my words. I'm repeating this from somebody in the hockey world that knows of him a little more intimately than me. Yeah. And I said he did win a gold medal to this person in the hockey world, and their response to me was, and this is about as damning as it can get for me. Their response to me was, yeah, that team won in spite of him. That's crazy. And I kind of agree looking back on it, because you look at this is the one time this is the one time that I'll mention players. Here's why I truly feel like this team could have won. Yeah. The way that players were utilized that they did bring, like, it's one thing to look at the guys they didn't and go, how come that guy couldn't have been on Team Canada? The guys they did bring, it's like they didn't watch any tape of them. I know I'm biased here. Let me get this guy out of the way immediately. Jet Luchenko of the Guelph Storm, apparently all he's good at doing is killing penalties because that's all the ice time he ever saw. No one ever watched any tape of him on the power play in Guelph, tearing through defenses by himself and starting power play rushes from his own zone and carrying the puck literally 200 feet and making a backdoor tap in. Nope, we can't have him out there. Even though our power play is struggling, Matthew Schaefer, our quarterback, is gone, and we can't score goals. No, don't shake the lineup for a dynamic kid who plays a 200-foot game. After the tournament, these guys are going, oh, we didn't want guys that were one-dimensional. We wanted good two-way players. He's one of the best two-way players on the team, and he only played on the penalty kill. Unbelievable. Porter Martone, one of the most skilled players on the team, who's going to be a top 3 draft pick. Some people think number 1, that plays for the Brampton Steelheads. Him and Carson Rakoff play on the same line together for the Steelheads and score boatloads of goals. They didn't play together on a line once in the entire tournament, Clarkey. And okay, cool. You're going to bench Porter Martone for 2 games. Of course, the first game he comes back, he scores. You're going to bench Carson Rakoff. He took that goofy penalty. Okay, yep, cool. Okay, fine.
No. You didn't bench. You didn't bench, guys. It's too short of a tournament.
No, yeah. And the discipline, we'll get to that. Martone and Gavin McKenna lit up the under 18s on the same line for Canada. They were on a tear at that tournament where they won gold. They didn't play a second together on the ice. Like this is what I'm talking about, Clark. The guys Ryan, bring.
The reason. Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Well, why didn't they look at past success and go?
Well, here's the deal. They were too exhausted to practice,
dude.
So they couldn't have.
Let's
tried
transition to that
in practice. They were too exhausted.
So according
to Coach Cameron,
you referenced last year's disappointing thing, and Alan Letang came out afterward, the coach, and said, "We're all really disappointed. I'm disappointed in myself. We should have had a better result for the fans." Like, he came right out and said, "We did not get this done, and we should have been better. I needed to be better." He
was accountable.
He absolutely. That's the word that is on everyone's lips. The unaccountability of Hockey Canada, and specifically their figurehead that they picked for this tournament to represent them, Dave Cameron. In the U.S. game, after they lost, when Kenzie Lalonde asked him, "What are you going to do about the discipline issues on this team?"
Nothing.
He said, "I can't do anything. I can't do anything. They know their penalties. They have to decide for themselves that they don't want to be irresponsible." Like, Dave,
totally disagree. I totally, unequivocally disagree.
You can't say stuff like that, Dave. And the couple of the statements that he made, they lose to the Czechs. By the way, they get scored on 43 seconds into that game. They lose to the Czechs, and afterward they asked him if he had any regrets about the way the tournament went or the way he ran the bench, and he said no. Dave, I'm sorry, man. You can't. You have no regrets. You finished 5th. This is Canada. We don't do that here. This is a disastrous showing, and I truly believe that this team was good enough to win a gold medal if anybody else basically had been coaching. He was way too rigid in the way that he coached the team, and the unaccountability continued with those statements, Clarkey. Well, we didn't. They have one of the most undisciplined showings in terms of penalties, and including some penalties that should have been called that weren't, by the way, in that game. They don't practice the next day. The power play was awful. They don't practice. At least go out there and wheel out some power play drills. They lose to Latvia for the first time in tournament history. No practice the next day. Day of the biggest game of the tournament, the quarterfinals against Czechs, no morning skate. These guys didn't touch the ice between all those games. Not on the ice. They were exhausted.
They were.
Every other team played. Every other team practiced.
And half of them came from the other side of the world.
Now,
like, give me a break.
Now, I want to just address something too quickly here. I know I'm really not trying to be sour grapes here. I'm not, because this is tournament wide. I can't do. I don't know how much more I can do the double IHF refereeing.
I know.
It's embarrassing to the sport. It is. I'm sorry, guys. Like it's embarrassing to the sport.
100%.
What it is, the
doubt.
analogy I made was like, it's like getting a chocolate bar and then someone giving you an unsweetened chocolate bar after and going, see, this is just as good.
But dude, we sit here and complain about the NHL officials too. Like, I wouldn't say it's a chocolate bar and then an unsweetened chocolate bar.
Yeah, it is. Because the complaint we have here is the calls that they look at and they don't make typically. That's typically what it is. And
how you could look at those meeting calls and call a major on that first one is beyond me. It's beyond me.
That one was absolutely crazy, the Cole Baudouin one. Yeah. And my biggest problem with it is this. It's not so much that they called it a penalty, which, I mean, if it's a 2-minute penalty at best,
who cares?
Okay, right? I guess.
Exactly.
And I felt vindicated after I tweeted that wasn't even a penalty and people were losing it. And then Bob McKenzie and O-Dog both went on the TV and were like, that's not even a penalty.
You got to remind me I have a rant coming to here.
What bothered me the most about it is that kid, the Sikora kid on Chet, here it is, the Baudouin hit, the producer Adam right on top of it. He lays there. Look at that, thigh to thigh. It's not a knee. He goes right through his body. That's a great hit. I would be angry as a coach if my player didn't make that hit. Now, what happens here is the Sikora kid, he lays there like he's been shot
and grabs his thigh or his hamstring.
You can see not on this clip, but you can
he's looking for the ref
during the game. He looks back at the ref with a big smile on his face too. He looks back at the ref and goes, "Oh, his arm's up. Now I'm going to roll around like someone ran me over with a dump truck." Magically, he's right out there on the 5-minute major power play. I thought, and by the way, this takes a lot too, so people don't think I'm biased. That kid's a Capitals draft pick. I want him traded immediately. I don't want anything to do with that little puke.
Yeah,
I thought that kid is the most embarrassing thing that happened.
What's his name?
Entire tournament. Peter Sikora, not to be confused with
the
former
other
NHL. Different spelling.
Yeah. Well, he got booed every time he touched the puck.
He absolutely
did you see him
it. That's not a hockey player.
Did you see him getting his medal?
Yeah, I saw.
When he was getting booed and he looked up at the crowd and raised his hands. Anyway,
that kid was embarrassing.
One thing I want to say.
Embarrassing. Go ahead. Your rant.
I don't know I don't know if you probably don't see my tweets or whatever. And it wasn't even tweets. I was just responding to the NHL Network. Now, the NHL Network, in my mind, is owned by the NHL. It's available in Canada and the U.S. and maybe around the world.
Yeah.
They were blatantly cheering for the Americans.
Well,
I just thought, how can an entity like the NHL or one of its subsidiary companies, the NHL Network, clearly be cheering for a country in this tournament? And I called them out on it like numerous times. I'm like, who is running this? Some fan who just wants to... Whenever the Americans scored, it was like big capital letters. Americans go up 2-1. And when the other team scored, you know what they did? They retweeted Hockey Canada. They didn't even They didn't even type it out.
No,
or
I know what you
Hockey
mean.
Finland. They just retweeted it. I'm like,
genuinely, I wonder.
I would love to get the person who runs that Twitter account on this show.
I'm not trying to defend it, Clarkey. I'm not trying to defend it. I genuinely think and I'm not saying it's a good reason. The reason why is because the NHL Network carried the American games.
I get that. That's not a reason.
I'm just telling you that's what they would tell you.
And you know why? Because no other network wanted to carry it because it's not a big deal in the States. And
I know what you mean.
Ripping the NHL Network because no one watches that either in the States. It just drove me crazy, and I don't get riled up too much, but I got riled up over that, and I took my frustrations out on whoever.
What I will say,
you think they saw my tweets? Like if I'm replying, they would see them, right? They must.
If the admin is paying attention to the replies, I couldn't tell you, dude. I honestly couldn't tell you, but keep fighting the good fight is what I'd say. I mean, because
Brody's trying to get in the show here.
I do agree with you. So,
Brody
all right,
thinks the team's gone to the dogs. Hey, Brody.
The team, yeah, Brody. I'm not worried. I think Canada wins the gold next year, running away with it. I'm not worried. I'm just disappointed
we were missing a couple of good NHLers
some players that probably would. Yes, we were. No excuse, because I still think.
And I'm sure some Americans could have been there too, but
I still think the team would have won gold. Yeah, they could have had Will Smith, guys like that.
They beat Finland, and Finland nearly won the gold, and Canada beat them.
I know. I still think we could have won the gold. I just think that Hockey Canada and the brass and the coaching staff kind of embarrassed themselves.
Okay, let's get to Jeff O'Neill.
Yes, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will air my sit-down chat with the one and only, the O-Dog. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't remember. A lot of people do. He's the all-time leading scorer in Guelph Storm history. We're going to chat about that and so much more with the O-Dog next here on Instigating. Welcome back to Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. As promised, we're going to air my sit-down chat with Jeff, the O-Dog O'Neill of TSN Overdrive, TSN Hockey, and of course, OHL and NHL fame. We talk about everything. This is from my Guelph Storm podcast that I do. He's an alumnus of the team. He was the first guy to ever have his number retired at the Sleeman Center, deservedly so. Franchise leader in points with 329. He's still a legend in the Royal City. We chat about his time in the OHL and so much more. My sit down with Jeff O'Neill. Storm Nation knows this guy very, very well. He was the first name to ever be put up in the rafters at the Sleeman Center. I look out at the banner from the booth every single night. The all-time franchise leader in points with 329, a long NHL career, and now one of our favorite broadcasters on TSN 1050 and TSN Hockey. Ladies and gentlemen, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill. Oh, how are you, man?
Ryan, good to be here with you. It's just hearing that. I was thinking about it the other day, like playing junior. I'm 2 years away from being 50 years old, and I got drafted at 16 years old, man. It's like I need to show up there and reintroduce myself to the fans to say I actually played here like so long ago. It goes by so fast. Like I remember it like yesterday, being dropped off in Guelph from my parents, and it's like, you snap your fingers and you wake up and you're 50, man. That's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, well, the fans are well acquainted with you. They remember you just fine. I see a lot of O'Neill jerseys still in the stands, I can tell you. And if you were ever to grace the arena sometime, people would be real fired up about it. I want to ask you about that time of your life. Obviously, you mentioned getting drafted to the OHL, and I know you're a King City boy, and take me back to that time of your life, coming out of minor hockey and knowing that you were going to be a big-time fixture on an OHL franchise. What was that time of your life like for you and your family?
I mean, for my family, I can't speak for them. It was probably somewhat easy just watching me go through the journey because they weren't the ones doing it. But for me, it's an important time of life, and it's a stressful time of life too. You're a teenager, you're 15, 16 years old. You got a lot of things going on at school, relationships, and you've also got this, like, I guess you could call it adult side of life. I think some other kids went home and did their homework and played with their brother and their sister in their backyard. And I put like a shirt and tie on and played junior B with grown men and had aspirations of being the first overall draft pick. So my life as a teenager was a lot different than others. And there was a level, like I said, once I stepped out of school and back to home, and in my parents' car, there was a level of seriousness where it's a lot for a young kid to take on. But I think my dad and my mom, they kind of prepped me for that, especially my dad, who was kind of in the inside. Having two other brothers that played in the OHL, he knew what was going on and kind of prepped me for what was. And I mean, I was around it, so I knew what went into playing junior B hockey, midget hockey, the OHL. And you kind of just have it in the back of your mind what's going on there. I mean, my brother got drafted the year before me and played, and I was up close and personal watching the level of play. So I just look back on the whole experience where it was, and I'm glad I did it. You kind of, I think you grow up quicker. I mean, like I said, you're 15 and 16 years old, but there's also like an adult type of lifestyle that you're doing playing hockey where it was, I think it's just good for your growth.
Take me back to the early days in Guelph. What do you remember best about playing in the Royal City and being an OHL player? I mean, yes, the league is a little different now. Maybe the game, has changed and is a little faster, as people like to say, but you played in an era that was pretty rough and tumble. There were a lot of things that were let go back then that maybe don't get let go now. What do you remember about being a young player in the league and a player with a high profile too, that would have had a target on your back?
Well, I think the one thing separated from like level of play, toughness, like the Guelph Storm, and I think Mike Kelly set a standard and made it a mandate when he took over that organization. It was just like, we're going to bring good quality people into play here. And I think I'd like to think that that's carried on. You could speak more to that, but it just seems like if you were going to be a part of the Guelph Storm, there was going to be, and listen, not everybody's perfect. There's some bad apples in every group, but for the most part, like I think of the guys that I'm still friends with just through, like, just go down the line. If whether it was being a trade or drafting, it was just quality people. So that's the one thing I'll always be thankful for and appreciative of. And it was one of those things that it wasn't my kind of responsibility. You mentioned the era and how big and tough it was. We had people there that were going to stand up for each other, and they were always going to be tough. And it was kind of a team first mentality. So that's one thing I'll always appreciate, because that certainly wasn't that was not my specialty. But, being team tough, I think that just goes within saying the philosophy. If you get good people who care about the organization and their teammates, that's something that would just take care of itself.
You had some pretty good teammates that I know you're still close with today. Obviously, people think back to that era and immediately think of guys like Todd Harvey, Big Bert, obviously, Bertuzzi. What do you remember about kind of forming those relationships as young men, and many of you that went on to have very successful pro careers? What was that like, being part of a nucleus like that?
It was great. I mean, being friends with Bert and seeing him along the way. I know we had a few dinners along the way and kind of met underneath the tunnel in some training rooms, whether it be in Vancouver or Hartford or wherever. And it was always just good to catch up. I think it's when you play junior with guys, you always kind of have that special bond. So it was always fun to see guys along the way, especially Big Bert. He'd always seem to be ticked off at something along the way. So it was always good catching up with him.
Yeah, and he'd let you know about it too.
Oh yeah,
especially on the ice.
It was after "Hi, how are you doing?" and then he would say, "Oh, something's ticking me off." So that's just the way Bert was.
I'm not surprised to hear that. I think back to the night that your number went up into the rafters, and it was really, really special. I was there. I actually got to interview you after the game took place, and I know your Overdrive cohorts were there with you. It was a really fun night. A lot of special people out there for you. And I remember speaking to you, and you talked really glowingly about your time spent with Craig Hartsburg and how he really brought a pro mentality to a junior bench. What sort of impact did he have on you that ended up leading to a lot of great success that you had in the NHL?
I can speak for Craig and John Lovell. That's the one thing about going to junior hockey. It's just there's like an NHL type vibe and attitude and mentality, because they know, even John, who never coached in the NHL, he kind of knew what was expected at the next level. So, if it just helps you along the way when you're trying to get to a certain place, and you have people along the way that just kind of prep you for it, whether it be good and bad. Like, I'll be honest, both of my coaches, Craig and John, they were tough on me at certain times. It was not always a love fest where it was like, oh, great game, great shift. And I think that kind of preps you, the tough love, where you get to the big leagues and it's definitely not a love fest. You're expected to perform, you're expected to do things on a daily basis. So that was great, especially Craig coming in, who had just left the NHL and was looking to get back there. just tempo and practice and work ethic and practice and certain things that, you think are just kind of standard things. They're not acceptable. And I think I could just sum it up saying I had two great coaches there that really helped me mature and just basically the expectations of what goes on a daily basis. I guess professional habits, you can call them. They helped with all of that. It really helped me for the next level.
That night that your number went up into the rafters, I'm sure it was very emotional for you and your family. What do you remember best about that experience, and what an honor it was to be the first guy in team history, deservedly so, to go up into those rafters?
I was really proud, Ryan. I got to be honest with you. I think not everybody gets to, I had a good NHL career. I played for a long time, but not everybody goes into the Hockey Hall of Fame and wins Stanley Cups. And for me, it was quite an honor just to play for an organization. And it's not easy when you get drafted first overall. I think there's a lot of expectations where you're looking to, that player is looking to turn things around and you're looking to go the other way. And it doesn't always work out. I understand that now that I'm older and not playing anymore, where you see time and time again where it's like this expectations and it's just, anybody could be a bust and it not work out. So I'm just glad that I got there and I helped the team have success and kind of, the logo became more, it was just seemed like it was the years past. It was like, oh, Guelph Storm, they're a terrible team. So just to bring some honor back to that logo and make it a team that was recognized throughout the league, that's what I'm most proud of. But to see my jersey go up and Bert's go up, I'm really proud of that, of all the things that have happened in my hockey life.
Absolutely. And Ryan Callahan joined you recently, of course. Yep. And, the standard you guys ended up setting led to a real turnaround for the franchise. 4 OHL titles later, it's a model franchise and, 329 points. That's going to be a tough one to pass as you're the all-time franchise leader. And, before I touch on, obviously, a long pro career and what you're up to now, which everybody's familiar with, I think. I want to ask you about a really key moment on that junior journey, and that was representing your country at the World Juniors, where you're, the proud recipient of a gold medal, a loaded team with a lot of great talent. Take us back to that time representing your country and how much that meant to you.
It was great. I mean, I watched Jeff Bess play in the World Juniors. And I was like, man, that just seems like such a big step. And I think I played the next year. So it was, and I was lucky because there was a lockout. A lot of guys came back from the NHL and I went to Edmonton. I remember I had an injury. Something was wrong with my foot or something. And I couldn't skate a couple of days. And I was basically informed by Don Hayes, like, look, if you sit out, you're kind of sitting on the sidelines and basically because it's going to cost you a spot on this team. So I tried to gut it out and play in one of the inter-squad games, and I was lucky enough to make it. But to play with the best players in Canada, and I think what made it special was you can play in the World Juniors, but to play in one in Canada and win gold, it just seems like it's got that much more juice to it. So, to become buddies with all those guys, I mentioned seeing Bert along the way in the NHL. Every one of my World Junior teammates, we always said hello and have fond memories about that. There's just some really good time to play with the best of the best and not lose a game. It was pretty cool. It was one of the best experiences. Like I said, not everybody goes on to win Stanley Cups and, have all these accolades, Olympic golds and stuff like that. So I'm also really proud of the World Juniors.
As you should be. And then, of course, first overall pick in the OHL, 5th overall to Hartford in the NHL draft. And you pretty much became a pro right away. You did not spend very long in the minors. You played a game. And then you went on to a very successful career, 496 points in 821 games. It's an incredible accomplishment, highlighted by a 41-goal season in Carolina. What do you remember best about first stepping into the NHL? And do you have that kind of quintessential welcome to the league moment that guys talk about?
I certainly did. It was my first shift in the league. It was against Mark Messier. And I was like, it was just one of those moments where I was like a hockey nerd. I always watched hockey. I knew all about everybody. And it was just like to face off with Mark Messier. And I remember winning the draw and getting a cross check kind of from behind after. And I was like, I'm in the NHL and I just beat Mark Messier on the face off. My parents were there. It was in Hartford. It's just, And the one thing you realize, it's, and it's another stepping stone where no matter how many points and no matter how good you are in junior, like when they say the NHL is the best league in the world, it's for a reason. It's just to excel at that league. It's just, it's that much more and it's that much better. But, to play 820 games in the league against all of the greats like Gretzky, Lemieux, Crosby, Ovechkin, all of them. I played against a lot of great players, and that's the one thing I'll be thankful for. Just to go through the time I did, to play against Wayne, who was my idol, Dougie Gilmore, who's my other idol, and now become friends with those guys. It was definitely the best time of my life.
And I want to touch on, obviously, you go to Hartford. The franchise, unfortunately, is forced to move. You end up in Carolina, and there were some hard days in the early days of that franchise. Of course, it's very different now, a Stanley Cup winning franchise. You guys came up just short when you were there. That turnaround that happened in Raleigh, what do you remember about that time? Because it was pretty significant.
Yeah, it was, and it was much needed. It was kind of a weird time for the fan base, too. I don't know if necessarily anyone in Raleigh was clamoring to get hockey there. It was almost like the organization just said, we're moving to Raleigh-Durham, so you watch out, you better support us. And that was kind of a weird transition. Plus, we spent 2 years playing in Greensboro, which was an hour and a half away from Raleigh. And it was kind of it was a scene, I'm not going to lie. It was like, how are we supposed to build a foundation in Raleigh when we're playing in Greensboro and there's nobody going in Greensboro, and they had to put a tarp up on the top deck so it wouldn't look like there was no fans there. It wasn't the NHL, I'll be honest with you. Like, the spoiled side of the NHL is like filled buildings and rocking home barns, and it wasn't that. But as soon as we stepped into the new rink, it seemed to develop, and then just had some quality people there. We signed Ron Francis and we brought in Gary Roberts, and we just had a lot of quality people there. So to turn that around down there and to give I think it was a big part of giving the fans a taste of what, the Stanley Cup was. Ultimately, we didn't win it. They won it later in 2006. But that gave the fans the experience of going deep in the playoffs and what the experience was like. And it was big as far as like building the foundation down there.
And you're a big part of that, and obviously you're still a very celebrated Caniac, and I know the fans down there still love their O-Dog stuff, and you move on from there and you go to your childhood dream, and that's playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, something I know that you are still and should be incredibly proud of. Your last season in the NHL playing for the Leafs, you scored 20 goals. I mean, It's not like you were over the hill or something. Take us through that experience as a guy from King City that grew up, your parents Leaf fans, your whole family Leaf fans, and you get to pull the blue and white on.
Yeah.
What was that experience like, man?
I got to be honest with you, Ryan, there's ups and downs to both of that. The reason I was so thankful that I got to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but the reasoning behind it goes back a little bit deeper. I lost my brother in a car accident. And that was ultimately the reason why I wanted to be traded to be close to home. So there was some give and take there where there were some real difficult times, but to actually put the jersey on was it was a kid's dream. Like, you're just watching the team every day on Saturday night in the basement and then getting to put the jersey on. I can remember sitting beside Steve Thomas in Hamilton, my first exhibition game, and it was just kind of surreal. It was like I'm sitting beside Stumpy Thomas, about to play the Boston Bruins in Hamilton, an exhibition game, mind you. But it was just a great experience to play with Matt Sundin and my World Junior buddy Darcy Tucker and Brian McCabe. Just a tremendous experience. There was ups and downs, but I'll never forget it, and it was really special.
I was going to ask you about some of your standout teammates there, and you mentioned a guy that your colleague Brian Hayes has kind of jackknifed him as your friend here. I know you guys often laugh about this, but Darcy Tucker, he was one of my favorite Leafs ever, and on the ice, as intense as it's ever been in the NHL. Like, that dude was not big, but he was scary to play against. What do you remember about being teammates with that guy? Because he was entertaining.
He was, and he understood that, if you weren't going to be a 40 or 50 goal scorer, he was a good player. I think he scored 20 plus and 30 goals in the league, but he just brought it all. He's a farmer from out west, and it was just, he's a tough dude. And like I said, you look at him, especially you look at him without his equipment on. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got those long arms. And I think if anybody thought that they were going to go and grab Darcy Tucker and give him a beating, they were in for a rude awakening. You can go through some of the YouTube clips. Like, he fought some tough. He didn't just fight he fought some tough guys and was not afraid of anybody. So it was great to team up with him and play with him for a couple of years.
I want to ask you as well, obviously, I remember you best coming down the left side with that big right-handed shot, ripping wristers, top cheddar. You went up against some tough defensemen. We kind of touched on this earlier with the different era and some things that were allowed back then that probably aren't now. When you think back, give me a couple guys that you would go on the ice with and think, I got to make sure I know where that guy's at.
It's very easy. There's a couple scenarios. Dallas Stars with Darian Hatcher and that whole defense core was disgusting. There was Craig Ludwig back there. There was Richard Matvichuk, Darian Hatcher. It was just, you went in the corner against the Dallas Stars. There was some punishment. Or the worst ever was the New Jersey Devils when Ken Danico and Scott Stevens were on together. It was one of those things where, you know, you had to. You just had to be aware. It's like you couldn't play like a chicken, but you also had to make sure that I always said to myself, you might as well dish it out to them because they're going to try to destroy you. So that was my approach with those guys. It's like you might as well hit or be hit. But Danico and Stevens, they were as tough as it got.
Yeah, Scott Stevens, for my money, maybe the scariest NHL player ever. He was
pretty much.
He was a freak, and I used to hear stories. I'm sure you've maybe come across my cousin, Brad Shaw, who's still coaching in the league, and Chris Drury, of course. Used to hear some horror stories about old Stevie out there. He was something else. I want to touch on, obviously, you move on from pro hockey, and you've now become one of the most recognizable media faces, dare I say media forces, in this country. Overdrive is so insanely popular. For my money, it's the best radio show in the country, maybe in North America. And you're on the TSN hockey panel, giving your thoughts every night, particularly on Leaf games. I've often heard your colleague Ray Ferraro talk about how he got involved in media, and he knew early on that it was something he might like doing. When did it occur to you that media might be something that you would like to pursue? Because you're damn good at it.
It honestly kind of just happened by accident. It was the lockout, and I got a call from TSN Radio, which at that time I didn't even know was a thing. And I made some stupid comment during the lockout, and they wanted to just speak to me on it. And I called them, and it was James Sobalski and Bob Makowitz who were doing the show. And then I went in for another kind of segment just to kind of chat. It was a lockout. I was done playing, and there was just nothing going on. So we just kind of chewed the fat a little bit. And then I did it, I think, once more. And then I remember on my way out the third time, I pulled the guy aside and I said, hey, I don't mind doing this. Like, I like doing this. It's kind of seems like a good gig. And I kind of had some opportunities that I said, I'm not sure about that. But I went back and started a regular gig, and I never left. So it was kind of a weird start. I never really wanted it or thought about it, but I'm happy I did. It's been a great career.
Well, you have such a big personality, and like it lends itself really well to media. And like I said, so many people are familiar with the Leafs lunch days, into Overdrive now, which has been going a long time. Your work on the panel. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with your two co-hosts, because you, Hayes, and Noodles, Jamie McLennan, of course, you guys have a really unique dynamic. It's so fun to listen to. What's it been like working with those guys, and what makes the three of you together so special?
I think it's one of those things where it's not like you're forced to like each other, but it's almost like we're blessed to just be kind of old school sports guys where we enjoy each other's company, and it's pretty easy friendship. Because there's some people that probably have those kind of gigs where they're not exactly on best terms with everybody, but I think it just helps so much with chemistry to be good friends and have a lot in common and think about things somewhat similarly. We don't always don't always agree, but that probably makes it better for kind of viewership. But they're just great guys, and I think it all starts with Brian, because I think he's the best kind of host at that there is. He's just as good as it gets. So to work with two good guys like that, I'm sure doing any job, it's like when you get to work with good people, it makes it that much easier. So I'm very lucky that way.
Yeah, I mean, for my money, I've said it to many people. Hayes is the best sports host going right now. He's fantastic, and you and Noodles have such a unique chemistry too, having played. And I always enjoy it when you have guests on and they go, well, Dog and Jamie, you know what the NHL's like. That's always a fun little inside joke for you guys. I want to ask you a little bit as well about the Leafs right now. Obviously, you're still very passionate about the team. You should be. You're an alumnus. And you guys spend, of course, a lot of time talking about this team. And unfortunately, over the last 8 years, it's been a bit negative just because of the shortcomings in the playoffs. In your opinion, what is going wrong for this core four, whatever you want to call it? What is it that's going wrong here that they can't seem to get over that hump to have success?
Very simple, Ryan. I mean, I'll give you the short answer because there only is one. They haven't found a way, and they haven't figured out what's important in the playoffs. And I don't know if it's roster construction, but the same guys do the same things in the playoffs, and it's not good enough. The goaltending doesn't seem to be good enough in the playoffs, and their star players can't seem to find the right mojo to perform at the highest level. And the team's been mostly built on skill the last 5, 6, 7 years. And that just doesn't get it done. You got to get the right combination. And until they do that, they'll continue to do what they do. It's a pretty simple answer.
You recently went on a bit of a tirade about the whole Mitch Marner thing. And, he's been an interesting talking point in Leafland. But, people have made a lot of bones over the years about Toronto's a hard market to play in. The media is too hard on these guys. And you and Hayes in particular have, been vocal advocates of shooting that notion down. I agree. I think that Toronto is one of the best markets in the world. What about playing in Toronto? Because you experienced it, and you experienced it at a much tougher time than these guys are going through. What is so special about Leaf Nation? Because that fan base, man, have they been through some pain.
Well, they have been, but it's one thing. Like, you can get the money, you can get the contract, you can get all the attention, and whenever they play good, all I do is talk good about them, all of them. So it's one of those things where if you want the money and you want the contract and you want to be the big superstar and you literally don't win in the first round every year, I don't know what you expect to come your way. And it's not like we're personally attacking anyone. The job as an analyst to describe what happens on the ice, and I do the same thing every year where it's like they weren't good enough, that guy wasn't good enough, all the way down. It's not personal with anyone. It's not picking out anyone, but it is the same thing every year. So as far as the players go, I'm not sure what they're expecting, but that's just pretty basic analysis. That's what happened. And it's the same. It feels like Groundhog Day. Every time on SportsCenter, I'm like, well, these guys weren't good enough and they can't defend and they can't keep it out of their net. So it's the same show every time. It's kind of frustrating. So I'm not sure what the players are expecting, but that's what happens in a big market.
Well, I'm hoping it turns for you for sure, and we really appreciate your time. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I do want to ask you, though, like I said, and I'm sure you can tell, I'm a very avid Overdrive fan. I don't think I've missed an episode over the last 7 years. There have been a few moments over the life of the show that have stuck out to me in terms of you guys breaking down in laughter. There have been a couple. I talked to Hayes. He was a guest on an old show of mine with Chris Clark, and I want to bring up 3 that stick out to me. One is, and I discussed this with Brian, was the Pierre LeBrun chair incident. The muchacho when you had your surgery and they brought you into La Bamba, and the constipator. Which of those 3 do you think you laughed the hardest at?
I think the muchacho, because honestly, like, I just had shoulder surgery and I had to find something, and it was my wife's like shawl type thing, and I had to wrap it around my neck, and I had no other choice unless you literally want to put a shoulder brace just after surgery with blood coming. Like, it's just, I had no choice. And those guys put eyes on that, and they put eyes on it before because we had to film like some kind of commercial or something. So they knew it was coming. and they still saw it for the second time and they couldn't control themselves. But we had a couple of years there. We had no sports. We had to do shows without hockey, but anything, no sports shows, 3-hour sports show with no hockey and no sports. So it was, to get through those, you have to have some laughs once in a while. They were all fun.
Yeah, and you certainly did. That one sticks out for sure. It was pretty darn funny. I'll have to get Brian on and play confirm or deny that he set up that La Bamba playing.
For sure.
I'm sure he'll deny it. Wrapping things up here on Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. Thanks to Jeff the O-Dog O'Neill. Fun chat. I sat with him just before the hockey season started. It was a great chat with him. I mean, he's one of the best. Just a super guy. Gave me a lot of his time, as you can see. Awesome dude. Awesome to be back on the show.
Nicely done, Ryan.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was a fun chat with you. He's a legend in so many ways. Great to be back. Our first show of the new year. And
it's the first time we've really taken a couple-week break. Out of how many years? Like 15, 16 years we've been doing the show now? Seems like that anyway. And we took 2 weeks. We took 2 weeks off, and we heard it from our fans. Get back at it. We need you back at it. So I
did have people texting me going, "Where's the new episode?
Where's the show?" Like, for sure.
Give me a sec.
Same.
Like, I gotta.
Same. Can we have a little break? Can we have a little
break,
please? This takes.
We're back.
This takes an hour of our week.
We're back to work now. And you know what time it is? The end of the show. It's time for the couch potatoes. Clarkey,
love the
get us started on the right foot here.
Well, it's not on the right foot. I got to tell you, that doesn't matter. I've been very careful this year because I have some people in my life who are fans of a team who are performing way, way under where they should be performing right now.
Okay.
But I saw this video the other day, and first thing I thought of was, this is Ryan's cousin. Like we shouldn't be seeing this. The guy had a T-shirt. Adam, you can roll it. And I thought, what are we doing here? Like, I think Ryan should call this guy.
You think, what is it? The freaking Ranger jersey. Look at this shit.
Who's on the back though?
Look, Drury.
In Buffalo 2 fucking times. He killed us. How is this possible? Fuck Drury.
Well, he's not a happy Ranger fan, and he's ripping up a Drury jersey. Like, that's a double whammy for this show.
Was a jersey. It was a T-shirt.
Yes, a T-shirt. Yeah, a jersey. Is that what they're called? I know.
Yeah.
But the Rangers are struggling.
They are.
I've made this guy. I don't even know who it is. My couch potato. They are 3 points ahead of the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah,
that's all you need to know.
It is really
right.
It is.
And then I look in the NHL, and they're
pretty funny though.
I'm not saying it's funny.
No,
I'm not going, because you know what? The St. Louis Blues weren't very good in January when they won the Cup.
I know.
So you never know what can happen.
We need the coaching change down there.
No question. Love you.
Lavi,
how hasn't that happened? Anyway,
not my guy.
We don't have a lot of time left.
Yeah.
Ryan, that guy, whoever it was, he's my couch potato this week for ripping up a T-shirt with a Drury name on it. It's not right.
Yeah. The sacrilegious.
Exactly.
Come on. Mine very simple. It's a guy that we talked about in detail. I don't need to do it again, but just the unaccountability. It's Dave Cameron. I just thought that the way that he coached Canada, I just could not stand the statements, the excuses. My 18 and 19-year-old guys are tired. I have no regrets. Well, we do. And I hope that Hockey Canada sincerely learns from what they did this year, because it was, I don't know, they need some new voices in there figuring things out. Very simple. That's my couch potato. Two bad ones.
Quick and easy.
Here. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're thrilled to be back.
Before we go, I just must say, we could be on a collision course to an Eastern final, you and me.
I will enjoy that very far away from you. So... Yeah. I just want you to know that.
They're two really good hockey teams right now. They really are. Man. The Leafs are playing great. The Caps are playing great. Yeah, it's really good. It's fun to watch.
It is fun. All right. For this show, we might have to do a sit-down watch party. We may.
Simply
for the content.
The Avs just lost again, didn't they? I think they lost bad.
Don't do that to producer Adam.
Sorry, producer Adam.
Don't do that to producer Adam.
Happy New Year.
Yes. Remember, you can watch this show Friday nights at 8, Sunday nights at 9 with our friends on Whiteman TV. That's channel 6 for Whiteman subscribers. We debut on our YouTube channel Friday nights at 9. You can follow us on social media at Instigating Pod. We will be back next week with more Instigating.